West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Well, Special Prosecutor Jack Smith has revealed that he is expanding the Justice Department's criminal investigation of Donald Trump beyond Donald Trump's possession of government documents and Donald Trump's involvement in the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Those two investigations are the known jurisdiction of the special prosecutor, which was made clear when Attorney General Merrick Garland announced his appointment.
Good afternoon. I'm here today to announce the appointment of a special counsel in connection with two ongoing criminal investigations that have received significant public attention. The first, as described in court filings in the District of Columbia, is the investigation into whether any person or entity unlawfully interfered with the transfer of power following the 2020 presidential election or the certification of the Electoral College vote held on or about January 6, 2021. The second is the ongoing investigation involving classified documents and other presidential records, as well as the possible obstruction of that investigation, referenced and described in court filings in a pending matter in the Southern District of Florida.
And now there are three investigations of Donald Trump. Yesterday, Special Prosecutor Jack Smith revealed that he is investigating Donald Trump's interference with the vote counting in the presidential election in Georgia. Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger's office confirmed that they have received a subpoena from Special Prosecutor Jack Smith. The Washington Post was the first to report on the subpoena, which demanded, quote, any and all communications in any form to, from, or involving Donald Trump and his staff and associates. The subpoena specifies that list of people includes 19 named individuals, including attorneys Rudy Giuliani and John Eastman. The news of that subpoena has revealed to Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani, if they did not know it already, that special prosecutor is investigating what they did in Georgia and what they said to Georgia officials. Included in that communication that the Secretary of State Raffensperger will have to hand over to Jack Smith is the audio recording of what is now the most notorious phone call in presidential history.
All I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have.
Many legal experts who on this program who have been right about everything in the Trump investigation so far have said that audio recording is something close to proof beyond a reasonable doubt that Donald Trump committed federal and state election crimes during that phone call. by asking Georgia's Secretary of State to produce a fraudulent vote count. This is a hugely important expansion of the special prosecutor's investigation, and it is an investigation that we already know includes the most damning criminal evidence of Donald Trump actively engaged in criminal conduct on the phone with Georgia's Secretary of State. The January 6th committee today scheduled 2 public meetings for next week, the first on Monday, during which they may make criminal referrals to the Justice Department, which are in effect simply suggestions that the Justice Department conduct criminal investigations, presumably of certain people who may very well already be under criminal investigation by Special Prosecutor Jack Smith. The January 6th committee member, Adam Schiff, has said that he believes the January 6th committee's investigation is far out ahead of where the Justice Department is now.
We have been far out ahead in most respects of the Justice Department in conducting our investigation. I think they have made use of the evidence that we have presented in open hearings. I think they'll make use of the evidence that we present in our report to further their investigations.
On Wednesday of next week, the January 6th committee will have its final public hearing where it will present the committee's final report. Reporters at Talking Points Memo say they have obtained text messages that Mark Meadows handed over to the January 6th committee. Those text messages to and from Mark Meadows reveal Mark Meadows to be an active participant in the conspiracy to overturn the presidential election on January 6th by urging Vice President Mike Pence to commit a federal crime and tamper with the Electoral College vote count in Congress on January 6th. And those text messages to and from Mark Meadows reveal not just criminal conspiracy, but also religious fanaticism, ignorance and hatred of the Constitution, and of course, bad spelling. Republican Ralph Norman was elected to the House of Representatives in South Carolina when Donald Trump was elected president in 2016. And in a text message to Mark Meadows, 11 days after the January 6th attack on the Capitol, Ralph Norman revealed his total disregard for the Constitution by urging this criminal plan. Quote, "Our last hope is invoking martial law. Please urge President to do so." That's 3 days before Joe Biden's inauguration, and that is Ralph Norman urging martial law. And like most Republicans who support that idea, he does not know how to spell that version of the word martial. That is a true believer. Ralph Norman had no incentive to send that private communication to Mark Meadows other than firmly believing that that's what should happen. When politicians speak publicly, you're never really sure what they really believe. It's what they say privately that matters. And there's Ralph Norman privately saying that what he really means, what he really wants to do, is just throw out the Constitution, break every election law in the country all at once. Congressman Ralph Norman has just been elected for another 2-year term in the House of Representatives. Georgia Congressman Rick Allen has been a Republican member of the House of Representatives since 2015. On January 8th, 2 days after the attack on the Capitol, Congressman Allen wrote this to Mark Meadows. "Mark, please know that I have prayed for President Trump, his family, for you, and the entire administration. Our nation is at war. It is a spiritual war at the highest level. This is not a war that can be fought conventionally. This is God's battle, and he has used President Trump in a powerful way to expose the deceit, lies, and hypocrisy of the enemy. The Trump family and all of us have paid a heavy price to be used by the Father, but the war is just beginning. We have had a major setback, and people are taking sides, and my plea to my fellow believers who want to cut and run is judge not, lest you be judged. We have all fallen short of the glory of Almighty God." President Trump need to be ministered to. He needs the love that only Jesus Christ offers. This is his opportunity to confess that he can no longer fight this battle alone. He must give it to Christ, and God Almighty will show him the way to victory. I will continue to pray for all of you. Please let me know how I can help. Yet another example in which prayer did not work. To which Mark Meadows replied, God bless you.
It is Wednesday, the 14th of December of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? And for those of you who are in the know, we use the plural rather than the singular as was depicted in the original movie. Because there's a lot more priests to have to contend with. Bishops, too, which is really who he was referring to, because Richard Burton was the Archbishop by that point. And like I said, if you're in the know, then you know. All right. Also, don't think anything untoward. We are not wishing any type of, threat. We are not issuing any threat. We are just referring to a lovely egg dish with a velvety hollandaise sauce. Smothered. All right. Well, how are you? We have another busy day, of course. The World Cup, if you were into that. France plays Morocco, which is, some people might say the colonizer versus the colonized and what might happen. But I don't know. I'm always for Big Blue. We're going with Ole Bleu, because that's what we do. And I will say, though, Morocco has played some interesting football. Argentina has advanced, and there's been a lot of racist type of chanting and whatnot, and I have to say that's probably fairly rampant, and it should be cut down. It's curious that Qatar won't let you wear a rainbow t-shirt. But, I don't know. Chanting racist type things in Spanish. Right outside the stadiums. Nothing. No problem. Racist tropes about the players on the French team. Which is, quite international in some sense because of the far-flung colonies that France had. But, when you're French, and when you know. So there you go. What else is going on? We had a little tete-a-tete here, and it's still continuing as I speak. Though I've closed the Facebook tab just because there's too much dinging. I try to shut off these notifications and they keep dinging. Anyway, the elementary school was closed down early. Now, it makes sense. But they were closed down because they were at 40% or above with student and staff. Actually, 40% of the students are sick. And they don't have enough staff that are not sick to have that 1 to whatever ratio it is, 1 teacher to so many students. So they didn't even have enough staff to staff what was left of the kids that ostensibly were not sick. But, parents, especially the ones that don't vax their kids and they're sending them to a public school. Send them to school sick. Yeah, we have to have herd immunity. Get everybody sick. And that's how you have measles outbreaks. And you try to explain it to them, and they just don't care. So at some point, I've decided I am not arguing with any of these anti-vaxxers anymore. In fact, I'm going to minimize all engagement because it goes nowhere. The only place that you may go is when they send in the request to have you suspended by the social media platform you happen to be on at that time while engaging them. And it's not just anti-vaxxers. It's basically anybody. They're all against public health. Because it's some sort of, mind control. So when they got the tinfoil hats on, I'm not going to bring out the parchment and try to convince them that one is better than the other. I'm just not going to do it. I've done this before, and I'm just not going to do it. Sort of like how the Jehovah's Witnesses yesterday knocked on our door really early the other morning and wanted to know if I wanted to share, and I said no. No, thank you. And I didn't really even wait for them to say, oh, God bless. And, before I shut the door. I didn't slam it or anything. I was, I smiled. I was nice. But, no, I used to engage, and now I'm not. It used to be fun to, put on a performance, and I just don't want to waste the time. Because that's what it is, a waste of time. But now the high school is closed, and the junior high looks like it's going to be closing down early, too. So the whole school district in Rogue River, Oregon, the kids are sick, and so are the staff. And I don't know what we could have done to try to prevent such a thing happening. And you try to remind these kids, and I got to tell you, they're kids. Look, we're all old here, probably listening to this show at this point, maybe. But, I'm dealing with kids who are younger than my late son, who think they know better about medicine and everything else, and they can't even, do conjunctions right. If you can't spell, I'm not going to really think that you've filed a peer-reviewed medical paper before, please. So, it's all some sort of anti-government, and it's a mishmash of all the stuff that you expect to see on the right wing, who want to take up arms to save America from who? Yeah, Americans. Because I don't know where these people are from, but they certainly aren't the type of Americans that we've seen depicted pretty much, forever. No, I'm not talking about the ones who genocided the American Indian across the plains of America. Okay. Well, that's probably who a lot of these ones that are upset right now, that's the stock they come from. No doubt. Jeez. Anyway, where are we going with this? I'll tell you where we're going with this, because with all the schools closed down, they still deny the most obvious. And I'm getting this thing like, oh, well, these are like common diseases that have been happening forever. And I'm like, oh, God, these people would justify the plague. Don't do anything about the plague. It's against God's law. Oh, my God. It is right. All right. It almost makes me pine for the days of a more authoritarian, I guess we're going to get it. No, we're not going to go there. I was just going to say that back in the day, they would have called them heretics and dealt with them, thusly. And I'll leave the thusly hanging. And that would be a literal depiction, too, because if they were lucky. But we don't want to go there because everybody's entitled to their opinion. I just hate the idea that we have to give them a platform while they're cutting the legs out from ours. Oh, they have a First Amendment right to destroy everything that we have, that we hold near and dear about being Americans in a representative democracy. I don't know how we come to that. Germany didn't wait around. I've heard Peru spoken in some glowing positivity, but I'm a little curious because that's a right-wing takeover of the government. The peasant president wasn't in office for very long, and then they started accusing him of corruption. How does the peasant guy get enough wherewithal to even get to be corrupt on the level that they had already been corrupt? Because they know the game very well. And somehow we're helping them. I hearing these glowing reports. Oh, yeah, they dealt with their corrupt politicians. And I'm all like, is he really corrupt? Or is it the same old trying to take over Peru and install another Fujimori? You never know. I mean, I actually think who they put in there is from the Fujimori Party or affiliate. Yes. We're all old enough to remember these brouhahas back in the day. I mean, what about Imelda Marcos's shoes? No one ever talks about shoes anymore. Okay. So they got this kid, Bankman-Fried. I say they got him. He's still in the Bahamas. They haven't extradited him. I don't know how that works. You know, it's supposed to take some time. But anyway, he's looks like he's like they're gonna go after him as probably like a Madoff on steroids, which looks like what it is too. So I don't know. I mean, do we blame his parents? In some ways, I feel a little sorry for them. They're both teacher lawyers at Stanford. They're taking a hiatus for a bit. They're not teaching any classes this coming term, and stepped away early for the holidays. Not because they're sick. I don't know. Maybe they're sick at heart. You never know. But on the other hand, I don't know. Did they just let this kid do anything? I'm calling him a kid. Maybe I shouldn't. He's a full-grown man stealing money from a lot of people. And we know why they're going to come down hard on him. Because he stole from the rich, and we've already gone through this discussion. It's okay to steal from all of us plebes. Drain our accounts with recurring donations we don't know that we signed up for in the Trump campaign. They're still getting away with that. I don't know how. But once you start stealing money from the rich, no, it's you don't do that. That's why it seems like the way our economies work now with these megalomaniac, mega-billionaire, trillionaire types is it has a certain mob mentality. Mm-hmm. You gotta give them a taste. You gotta let them dip their beak. And, I don't know, don't take a pencil home. You're stealing from the boss. That's right. So, that is why I believe they're coming so hard on them. But there are a lot of plebes that said, hey, maybe we should sink our life savings in this pyramid scheme. That's a house of cards. When you got a pyramid scheme that is also a house of cards, calling it a Ponzi scheme is a nice way of putting it. I don't know what it's called on the other side, but that's what people were getting into with this cryptocurrency. So I'm just hoping that maybe cryptocurrency won't be the Frank of the realm. I hope not, because it takes a lot of energy. Now, maybe we've developed fission energy just in time to be able to handle all these Bitcoin mining farms that just suck energy and put out massive amounts of heat and other gases or results of their energy sucking. Maybe that's why we have fission, finally. Well, we don't have it yet, okay? They were able to affect this creating more energy than they put in. Okay, that's what fission is. It's the work of the stars. They were able to do this for a fraction of a second. They're going to have to scale it up, and it's going to take a little while because think of the containers that have to contain this reaction. It's not like the vacuum of space, which is not a vacuum, I know. But you know what I mean. If you know, you know. We do have a curated show for you today, and we might as well get back into a bit of order because a couple of these may turn into a long read. I had actually looked at the article out of the Washington Post about the young DHS analyst who had been tracking the chatter of all those who were storming the Capitol on January 6th or planning to, weeks ahead of time. And his filing of papers and sounding the alarm, as was set up after 9/11, by the way, fell on deaf ears and in some cases was actually ridiculed. And it makes you wonder, Because in the article, they also mentioned that when Trump political appointees were, like in transition out of the office because, they couldn't be there and then they had to put another acting one in, they were able to push through some of these requests. But then as soon as the Trump political appointee got put in there, all chatter about the chatter was muted. Very interesting, but it was an extremely long read, and I think maybe we'll save it for tomorrow, maybe even Friday, but we will want to get into that article. But today, on the rest of the menu, as we continue at the top, of course, Lawrence, about Jack Smith expanding his Trump investigation, follow the subpoenas. On the rest of the menu in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on this fine Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, outgoing Democratic Governor Kate Brown commuted the sentences of all 17 people on Oregon's death row to life without possibility of parole. A bench trial is started to determine if an Alaskan Oath Keeper lawmaker is unfit for office because of his participation to overthrow the U.S. government. And the Department of Justice and Homeland Security were urged to investigate a multi-state conspiracy by Trump groups to copy voting software and circulate it in the wild. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where a Russian FSB officer was charged by U.S. prosecutors with smuggling sensitive electronic components to help Russia's military effort. And they're under sanction, that's why. And a key figure in a massive German tax evasion case was convicted of 3 counts of tax evasion and sentenced to 8 years in prison. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by the Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of that chat room link across the page near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page, and do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, especially in these troublesome times and holiday period as well. If we can utilize both of those, we will. But the bills keep going up, and if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio and maybe send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, it really does help pay our bills. So please do. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter while we still can and while we still are there, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter if you dare, and you can do that at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime, so you could just get to Daily Co's and find me there, but you can also find that by way of the links that I have set up there on my Twitter feed, so check it out. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, is by Hillary Baroud from the Oregonian. Governor Kate Brown announced yesterday, Tuesday, that she would commute the sentences of all 17 individuals on Oregon's death row to life in prison without the possibility of parole, the latest in her end-of-term string of clemency decisions. I have long believed that justice is not advanced by taking a life, and the state should not be in the business of executing people, even if a terrible crime placed them in prison, Brown said in a statement sent out in a press release. This is a value that many Oregonians share. The governor also directed the Department of Corrections to dismantle the state's death chamber. Oregon has not executed anyone on death row for a quarter century, and Brown continued the moratorium that former Governor John Kitzhaber put in place in 2011. Governor-elect Tina Kotek, who, like Brown and Kitzhaber, is a Democrat, is personally opposed to the death penalty based on her religious beliefs, and said during the campaign that she would continue the moratorium. Voters have gone back and forth on the death penalty over the years, abolishing and reinstating it repeatedly. Voters' most recent decision on the death penalty was in 1984, when they reinserted it into the state constitution. Brown's order will take effect today. Mark Thiessen of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. An Alaska lawmaker may be unfit to hold office because he's a member of the Oath Keepers, a far-right extremist group that has either advocated for or engaged in concrete action to overthrow the U.S. government, a lawyer said in his opening arguments yesterday, Tuesday, for a case against State Representative David Eastman. We are going to present overwhelming evidence on both those elements, said the lawyer with an Anchorage civil rights law firm. The lawyer is Gorian Dudakian, represents Randall Kowalski, a Wasilla resident whose lawsuit seeks to disqualify Eastman from holding office. The bench trial before Superior Court Judge Jack McKenna will determine whether Eastman, a Wasilla Republican, will be allowed to be seated in the legislature next month after winning re-election last month. McKenna earlier ordered the State Division of Elections not to certify the results of the race pending an outcome in this case. Kowalski's lawsuit points to a provision in the Alaska Constitution stating that no one who advocates or who aids or belongs to any party or organization or association which advocates the overthrow by force or violence of the government of the United States or of the state shall be qualified to hold public office. Stuart Rhodes, a founder of the Oath Keepers, and Florida chapter leader Kelly Meggs were convicted last month of seditious conspiracy related to the January 6, 2021 riot at the U.S. Capitol. It wasn't a riot, it was an insurrection. For what prosecutors called a violent plot to overturn President Joe Biden's victory. They were among 33 Oath Keepers charged after the insurrection. Eastman, represented by attorney Joe Miller, has admitted to being in Washington, D.C. that day, but only to witness an address from President Donald Trump that preceded the attack on the Capitol. Eastman said he did not take part in the riot and that he was not been accused of any crime. Now, Eastman is a member of the Oath Keepers and has contributed more than $1,000 in support of the group, the lawyer said, and even after the events of January 6th insurrection and the recent conviction of founder Stuart Rhodes, he still has not taken any steps to resign his membership or renounce his membership, either publicly or privately, Dudigan said. He said they would present evidence that the Oath Keepers combined extremist rhetoric about the insurrection with seditious conduct, and claimed the group would fight either with or without Trump's support. Davis and John Swain of the Washington Post brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. An effort by supporters of former President Donald Trump to copy sensitive voting software in multiple states after the 2020 election deserves attention from the federal government, including a criminal investigation and assessment of the risk posed to election security, according to election security advocates. As new information about the multi-state effort, some might call it a conspiracy, continues to emerge, the National Election and Campaign Finance Reform Group, Free Speech for People, along with several former election officials and computer scientists, sent a letter on Monday urging the Justice and Homeland Security departments to investigate. They wrote that by copying voting software and circulating it in the wild, partisan election deniers have created a digital roadmap that could help hackers alter election results or disrupt voting. Evidence of the multi-state effort was unearthed by plaintiffs in a long-running lawsuit over the security of Georgia's voting system. They found that as Trump falsely blamed his 2020 defeat on hacked voting machines, sympathetic officials in rural Coffee County, Georgia, allowed computer forensic experts paid by a nonprofit run by Trump-allied attorney Sidney Powell to copy voting software in January of 2021. That software was then uploaded to a website from where it was downloaded by election deniers across the country. Because these events were revealed in a private lawsuit rather than through a law enforcement investigation, the significance and consequences may not have registered with the relevant federal agencies, read the letter. Several of its 15 signatories have served as experts for plaintiffs in the case. Well, before we get to our break, I should mention, or maybe even add, that Jack Smith has been subpoenaing people, and they happen to be in Georgia. So I have a suspicion that indeed Jack Smith is on the case. All right, let us get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Not Your Father's Ghost Story. The Eternal Daughter is a further collaboration between writer-director Joanna Hogg and actor Tilda Swinton, the two having worked together on The Souvenir and The Souvenir Part 2. The Eternal Daughter, I want to say it's a quiet film, but that's not quite right because it depends as much on its sounds as its visuals and performances. It's just that it's laconically paced with all this space around its moments. I imagine this feel is helped by Hogg's filmmaking process. She shoots in scene order and has her actors improvise the dialogue, which really works for this story about a mother and a daughter who are spending a long weekend at this Welsh manor house and search for a way to talk to each other. Better to say, it presents itself simply, yet it's really daring. First, it's not totally standalone. Without being a sequel to Hogg's Souvenir movies and being in a different genre, the ghost story, it still features the same mother-daughter characters, but later in their lives, with Swinton playing both parts. Most importantly, though, I don't think it cares about us. I mean, Hogg and Swinton want us to see it, want us to like it, it's very personal for them, but they're not trying to sweep you up with action or dazzle you with effects or beguile you with dialogue, none of the things that movies do to hook. They just want you to sit with it, like this daughter needing to be with her elderly mother. And it's a ghost story. It's got those elements, those filmic conventions, but it's not trying to make you jump or give you chills. And maybe it's a failure at being horror, but it's really the perfect frame to talk about how we're haunted by memories and guilt and regrets and other people alive and dead, and how we're often trapped listening for things that may or may not be there and being unnerved by how both the remembered and the living can remain hazy and indistinct despite us looking directly and searchingly at them. The Eternal Daughter somehow teases out intimate connections while remaining distant and eerily unconcerned with us, as it acts and reenacts its own narrative. Like ghosts. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? What, did he balance on that big chair?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
This is the story of a very special woman. In a matter of seconds, she turned herself into a great mathematician or an entrepreneur. Her knowledge was limitless and still is. She could also make monsters disappear, especially those that lurked in the shadows under the bed. Once, this woman put back together a teenage girl's broken heart, which had been shattered in 1,000 pieces. Just by giving her a bear hug. She masqueraded as a regular person at work, but as a superhero at home. Everyone knows her as Gabriella. I still call her Mom.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need to help, complete with tips and resources at aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Arthritis is common among veterans. Traumatic and overuse injuries during active duty are risk factors for developing arthritis. Fortunately, there are low-cost or no-cost strategies that can help veterans manage arthritis. Physical activity can reduce pain and improve function. It can also help improve mood and play a role in managing other chronic conditions, such as heart disease, diabetes, and obesity. You can do low-impact activities, such as walking, biking, swimming, and water aerobics, all good forms of exercise. Arthritis-specific classes can help you get started. Information on classes, exercise programs, and tools are available at cdc.gov/arthritis. These resources can help reduce pain and improve function. Learning self-management techniques can help all veterans become more active, improve their overall quality of life, and thrive.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Good eating habits developed in childhood can last a lifetime.
But getting children to eat their fruits and vegetables is a common problem. Eating them adds important nutrients, helps control weight, and reduces the risks for many serious illnesses. Children in the U.S. are eating more fruit. However, 60% of children get fewer fruits than recommended, and 93% don't get enough vegetables. Child care, schools, and school districts can help change this by meeting or exceeding federal nutrition standards for meals and snacks, including fruits and vegetables wherever food is offered, and helping children learn about and taste fruits and vegetables. At home, parents can eat a variety of fruits and vegetables with their children and provide them as snacks, even if it takes many tries. Also, parents can include their children when shopping for, growing, and preparing fruits and vegetables. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
If you sometimes wonder whether Congress is obtuse, narcissistic, or just stupid, Senator Joe Manchin is evidence that the answer is yes. Plus, these days, the West Virginia corporate Democrat is mad, in both senses of the word. First, he's mad at Representatives Pramila Jayapal, Raul Grijalva, and other gutsy progressive members of the U.S. House. They rose up against their own party leaders this month to kill Manchin's corrupt backdoor effort to force his massive Mountain Valley pipeline down the throats of rural and small-town people in his own state. Local people have repeatedly defeated this foul fossil fuel boondoggle, but their senator kept conniving with industry lobbyists and congressional leaders to revive it, trying to stiff the public will. His latest gambit was to hide the MVP scam in the humongous $850 billion military budget, hoping no one would notice. But Jayapal, Grijalva, and a few other progressive leaders did notice, and they had the chutzpah and the votes to strip it out of the Pentagon bill. This drove the plutocratic senator from being mad, as in angry, to going mad, as in nutty. The defeat of his political scheme, he wailed, was the result of, quote, toxic tribal politics, adding that this is why the American people hate politics in Washington. Get a grip, Joe. You're the one in Washington sneaking around to help the super-rich corporate tribe rig government rules to extract more profit from actual toxic contamination of people, whole communities, and Mother Nature. You and your corrupt cohorts are why millions of Americans hate Washington politics. This is Jim Hightower saying, oh, and by the way, Senator, if you really think toxic gas pipelines are essential for America's energy future, why don't you and your industry funders run some under your neighborhoods for a change?
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1990. That was the day that 20,000 workers in the city of Fez, in the North African country of Morocco, went out on strike. Austerity measures had hit the country's working people hard during the 1980s. A drought had made the situation even worse. Unemployment rates for those under 21 had soared to higher than 30%. Two labor unions, the General Workers' Trade Union and the Democratic Confederation of Labor, called for a general strike. Government officials agreed to meet with the unions to discuss their demands. But the government would not agree to specific wage increases. Plans for the general strike moved forward. It is estimated that more than half of the Fez workforce participated in the general strike. Large numbers of workers in other Moroccan cities also participated in the action. In Fez, bus drivers showed their solidarity by joining the strike. In response, the government attempted to keep bus service going by putting police and soldiers behind the wheel. This angered many of the young demonstrators, and some threw stones at the scab drivers. Armed forces clashed violently with the strikers. The government claimed the strikers started the violence. The protesters pointed toward the police. A fire was started at the five-star Hotel Merendez in Fez. Other symbols of wealth, such as limousines, car dealerships, and banks, were also damaged. After the 24-day strike, Moroccan officials claimed that 2 demonstrators had been killed. But human rights groups disputed that number and said 33 had been killed. Many more were injured. Hundreds were arrested. After the strike, the government agreed to raise wages by 15%. Many protesters were tried for their participation in the demonstrations. Some received prison sentences as long as 10 years. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 35 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the mid-40s, mostly cloudy throughout the day, and then a bit of sun late in the afternoon. Highs will be, as I said, in the mid-40s, winds light and variable. Clear skies overnight, lows in the mid-20s, winds light and variable, and then sunny tomorrow, with highs in the mid to upper 40s, winds light and variable. And in the extended forecast, it looks like we have a fairly big storm expecting to last all week next week, beginning late Sunday night. For now, it looks like relatively dry conditions, though it's a bit moist out there nonetheless. Pollen is rated as none right outside the window in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 44 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at level 2. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.33 inches. Visibility is at 8 miles, and that relative humidity is at 94%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 31 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 34 degrees and fair, though they do have an advisory that for potential general disruption from snow and ice. Rome is 53 degrees with heavy mist. Kyiv is 22 degrees and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 35 and clear. Hong Kong is 54 degrees with light rain. Tokyo is 41 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 54 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 42 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York is 36 degrees Fahrenheit, sunny, and under an active gale watch. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Staff at the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. An officer with Russia's Federal Security Service was among 7 people charged by U.S. prosecutors yesterday, Tuesday, with smuggling sensitive electronic components to help Russia's military effort. Prosecutors claimed the 7 worked with 2 Moscow-based companies controlled by Russian intelligence services to acquire electronic components in the U.S. that have civilian uses but can also be used to help make nuclear and hypersonic weapons and in quantum computing. The exporting of the technology involved is heavily regulated and occurred in violation of U.S. sanctions, according to a 16-count indictment unsealed yesterday, Monday, in Brooklyn. 5 Russian nationals were charged, including Vadim Konoshenak, a suspected officer with Russia's Federal Security Service, or FSB. He was arrested in Estonia last week and will undergo extradition proceedings to the United States, U.S. authorities said. About 375 pounds of ammunition originating from the United States was found by Estonian authorities in a warehouse used by the officer, according to federal prosecutors. The other 4 Russian nationals remain at large. U.S. officials said the arrests had disrupted the procurement network used by Russian intelligence services, which they said had been operating as far back as 2017. U.S. scrutiny of efforts to evade sanctions on Russia intensified after the invasion of Ukraine last winter.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Associated Press staff bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. A key figure in a massive German tax evasion case was convicted yesterday, Tuesday, of 3 counts of tax evasion and sentenced to 8 years in prison. The state court in Bonn convicted German lawyer Hanno Berger in connection with alleged crimes between 2007 and 2011. The 72-year-old, a former German tax official who later became an advisor to banks, funds, and investors, was arrested last year in Switzerland, where he had been since 2012. He was extradited to Germany in February. Berger was charged in connection with a so-called Cum-Ex scheme, which has spawned a series of legal cases. He was accused of helping investment bankers who swapped shares to collect multiple reimbursement for taxes they had only paid once. During the trial, the defense team admitted to wrongdoing on their client's part, but on a much lesser scale than what was alleged by prosecutors. Prosecutors had sought a 9-year prison term. The potential maximum sentence was 15 years. The verdict can be appealed. Another Cum-Ex case against Berger is ongoing at the state court in Wiesbaden. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but I just wanted to make mention that it is the 10-year anniversary, of course, of the Sandy Hook massacre. And anyone who's been around Netroots Radio and generally Daily Kos will know the connection that we have with Sandy Hook 10 years ago. And so I thought I'd leave it for the end because it still hurts tremendously. It hurts that those poor little kids never got to grow up, and it also hurts that so much denial about the murders and the money made off of those denials is a big hurt on the soul of America. So, indeed, that does bring us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.